"You're not man enough to satisfy me," Regina said, her heels clicking against our hardwood floor like a countdown timer. She didn't even look back as she grabbed her purse from the kitchen counter. "I'm meeting someone who actually knows how to treat a woman." The front door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the picture frames on the mantel. Through the window, I watched her Mercedes back out of our driveway, tail lights disappearing into the October darkness. The clock on the microwave read 11:47 p.m. I changed the locks before her car reached the end of our block. 22 years in construction teaches you to work fast when the situation demands it. My toolbox sat in the garage, and I'd replaced enough hardware in this old colonial to know every screw and bolt by heart. The deadbolt came off in 3 minutes. The new one went on in 5. While I worked, my mind processed the evening's revelation with the same methodical precision I used to frame a house. Regina's late meetings that started 6 months ago. The new gym membership she never used for actual exercise. The way she'd started pronouncing certain words differently, like she was practicing someone else's accent. The emergency contact list stuck to our refrigerator told me everything I needed to know. Right there, between my sister's number and the veterinarian, Catherine Holloway's information sat in Regina's careful handwriting. Grant Holloway's wife, the real estate developer who'd been circling our neighborhood like a shark, buying up properties for his latest downtown project. I pulled out my phone and typed, "Mrs. Holloway, this is Samuel Blackwood. You deserve to know. Our spouses are together tonight. Would you like to help me pack Regina's belongings?" The response came back in less than 2 minutes. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Bring boxes." Catherine Holloway arrived at exactly 12:30 a.m. in a silver Volvo that whispered money and good taste. She stepped out wearing dark jeans and a wool coat, her blonde hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. Even in the dim porch light, I could see the determination in her green eyes. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, extending a gloved hand. "I brought garbage bags. Seemed more appropriate." "Sam," I replied, shaking her hand. "And I like your thinking." We worked in efficient silence, emptying Regina's walk-in closet with the systematic thoroughness of a moving crew. Catherine handled the designer dresses while I tackled the shoes. Every piece of clothing, every accessory, every expensive bottle of perfume went into bags and boxes that we arranged on the front lawn like an upscale yard sale. "How long have you known?" Catherine asked as we folded Regina's cashmere sweaters. "Suspected for months. Confirmed tonight when she decided to rub my nose in it." I held up a red dress I'd never seen before. "You?" "Grant's been working late since summer. Then I found the credit card statements. Dinner reservations for 2 at restaurants I've never been to." She smiled grimly. "Amazing how stupid they think we are." By 2:15 a.m., Regina's entire wardrobe decorated our front yard in neat rows. Her jewelry box sat on top of the largest suitcase, and her collection of romance novels formed a small pyramid near the mailbox. Catherine had even thought to include a hand-lettered sign, "Free to good home, slightly used." We stood on the porch, surveying our handiwork. The October wind scattered a few leaves across the display, and I noticed lights flickering on in the Hendersons' house across the street. "Think they'll come back together?" Catherine asked. "Count on it. Regina hates being embarrassed, and Grant strikes me as the type who needs an audience for his victories." "Good." Catherine pulled out her phone and snapped several photos of the lawn display. "I want documentation." Sure enough, at 2:47 a.m., headlights swept across our yard as 2 cars pulled into the driveway. Regina's Mercedes followed by Grant's black BMW. Catherine and I remained on the porch, 2 silhouettes backlit by the house lights. Regina climbed out of her car first, her face cycling through confusion, rage, and humiliation in rapid succession. Grant emerged more slowly, his expensive suit rumpled, his silver hair slightly mussed. "What the hell is this, Sam?" Regina's voice carried across the yard, sharp enough to cut glass. "Spring cleaning," I called back. Found a lot of things that didn't belong in my house anymore. Grant stepped forward, puffing out his chest like a rooster in a barnyard. Now see here, Blackwood. Grant. Catherine's voice stopped him mid-sentence. She descended the porch steps with regal composure, every inch the society wife. I was wondering when you'd come home. The look on Grant's face was worth every minute of the evening's work. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and I swear I saw his knees wobble. Catherine, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You always were creative with the truth. She gestured toward the lawn display. Regina has excellent taste in clothes. Much better than her taste in men, apparently. Regina found her voice again. Sam, you can't just throw my things out on the lawn like garbage. Funny thing about that, I said, pulling the new keys from my pocket. This is my house. My name on the deed. My signature on the mortgage. You made your choice tonight. Live with it. You can't keep me out of my own home. Watch me. I jingled the keys. Bernard Finch makes excellent locks. You remember Bernard, don't you? He installed our first deadbolt when we moved in. Still does good work. Grant tried to salvage the situation. Look, Blackwood, maybe we can discuss this like civilized adults. Civilized? I laughed, and the sound carried across the yard like breaking glass. You want to talk about civilized? How civilized is it to sneak around with another man's wife? How civilized is it to make reservations at fancy restaurants while I'm working 10-hour days to pay for this house? Catherine moved to stand beside me, presenting a united front. Grant, I've already called my lawyer. The papers will be ready Monday morning. And Regina, I added, you might want to find somewhere else to sleep tonight. I hear Grant's penthouse has a lovely view of the harbor. The four of us stood there in the October wind, two couples who'd shared dinner parties and neighborhood barbecues, now facing each other across an unbridgeable divide. The Hendersons' porch light came on, and I saw Mrs. Chen peek through her curtains. Regina tried one last desperate play. Sam, please, we can work this out. It was a mistake. The only mistake was mine, I said, thinking you were worth 22 years of my life. Grant grabbed Regina's arm. Come on, let's go. As they drove away, Catherine and I remained on the porch, watching their taillights disappear into the night. The lawn display looked even more impressive in the aftermath, a monument to betrayal and consequence. Well, Catherine said, pulling her coat tighter against the wind. That was satisfying. It was a good start, I replied, but I'm just getting warmed up. The next morning brought coffee, clarity, and the satisfying sight of neighbors slowing down as they walked past my house. Word travels fast in our little corner of Portland, and Regina's impromptu yard sale had become the talk of Birch Lane. Catherine knocked on my door at 8 a.m. sharp, carrying a box of donuts and 2 large coffees from the bakery downtown. Thought you might need fuel, she said, settling into my kitchen chair like we'd been having breakfast together for years. The neighborhood's buzzing. Mrs. Patterson called me at 7 to ask if Regina was having a nervous breakdown. What did you tell her? That Regina was just clearing out some old things. Catherine's smile was pure mischief. I may have mentioned that Grant was helping her with the transition. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and studied my unexpected ally. Catherine Holloway moved through the world with quiet confidence, the kind of woman who noticed everything but revealed nothing until the moment was right. Her marriage to Grant had lasted 15 years, long enough to learn his patterns and weaknesses. So what's the plan? She asked, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Information first. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. I pulled out a yellow legal pad, a habit from years of construction planning. Tell me about Grant's business. Holloway Development. He specializes in buying up older neighborhoods and turning them into luxury condos. The profit margins are enormous, especially when he can convince longtime residents to sell below market value. How does he convince them? Catherine's expression darkened. Pressure tactics, code violations that mysteriously appear, permits that get delayed. Grant has connections throughout the city government. What about his personal life? Habits, routines, weaknesses? He works out every morning at the Harbor Athletic Club, lunch meetings at the Regency Hotel, Thursday nights at the poker game in Tommy Morrison's basement. Catherine paused, considering. He's vain, arrogant, and he underestimates women. Always has. I scribbled notes, building a picture of our target. Financial situation? Complicated. Grant leverages everything to the hilt. He looks wealthy, but most of his assets are tied up in development projects. The Harborview Towers project is his biggest gamble yet. If it fails, he loses everything. And Regina fits into this how? Your wife works in human resources for the city. She has access to personnel files, hiring decisions, policy changes. Catherine leaned forward. Grant's been cultivating her for months, probably since he started planning Harborview. The pieces clicked into place like a well-fitted joint. Regina's sudden interest in city politics, her new wardrobe and expensive tastes, the way she'd started talking about investment opportunities and leveraging assets. She's been feeding him information, I said. More than that. Regina's been his inside track to fast-track permits and bypass environmental reviews. The affair was just a bonus. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. 22 years of marriage, and my wife had been selling me out for a chance at Grant's lifestyle. The betrayal went deeper than simple adultery. We need proof, I said. I've already started gathering evidence. Bank statements, credit card records, phone bills. Grant's not as careful as he thinks. Catherine reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. These are copies of restaurant receipts, hotel charges, and some very interesting payments to a private investigator. He hired someone to investigate Regina? Background check, probably. Grant doesn't take chances with his business partners. She slid a photograph across the table. This is from last month, Regina and Grant at the Harborview construction site. The photo showed my wife and her lover standing beside a surveyor's tripod, Regina pointing towards something off-camera while Grant made notes in a leather portfolio. They looked like business partners planning a hostile takeover. Where did you get this? I hired my own investigator 3 months ago. Margaret Chen's nephew Danny. He's discreet and thorough. Catherine's smile turned predatory. Grant taught me the value of good intelligence. My phone buzzed with a text message. Regina. Sam, we need to talk. I'm coming by this afternoon to get some things. I showed the message to Catherine, who laughed out loud. She thinks she can just waltz back in and negotiate. Typical Regina. Catherine stood up and moved to the window, studying the remnants of last night's display. What are you going to tell her? Nothing, but I think she deserves a proper welcome. I spent the next hour making phone calls, first to Bernard Finch, who agreed to install additional security measures, then to Nina Rodriguez, my site manager, who promised to spread word about Regina's situation through the construction community. Finally, to my lawyer, who scheduled an emergency consultation for Monday morning. Catherine watched me work with professional appreciation. You're very thorough. 22 years in construction, you learn to plan for every contingency. What about Grant? What about him? He won't just sit back and let this happen. Grant's used to getting his way, and he doesn't handle humiliation well. I considered this. Grant Holloway had built his reputation on being the smartest guy in the room, the man who always came out ahead. Last night's scene had damaged that image, and men like Grant didn't forgive that kind of embarrassment. Let him come, I said. I've been dealing with bullies my whole career. The trick is making them think they're winning right up until the moment they lose. At exactly 2:30 p.m., Regina's Mercedes pulled into the driveway. She climbed out wearing her best power suit and the expression she used for difficult negotiations. Catherine and I watched from the living room window as Regina marched up the front walk like a general reviewing troops. The doorbell rang 3 times before I answered it. Hello, Regina. Sam. She tried to push past me into the house, but I blocked the doorway. I need to get some things. What things? My clothes, my personal items, my jewelry. You mean the things currently decorating the front yard? Regina's composure cracked slightly. This is ridiculous. I live here. Lived. Past tense. I leaned against the doorframe, making it clear she wasn't getting inside. You made your choice last night. Actions have consequences. We need to discuss this like adults. Adults don't sneak around behind their spouse's back for 6 months. Adults don't use their position at work to help their lover manipulate city permits. Adults don't stand in their husband's kitchen and announce they're leaving him for someone else. Regina's face went white. How did you know about Harborview? About the permits? About your new career as Grant's inside source? I smiled without warmth. Regina, you always underestimated me. That was your first mistake. Catherine appeared beside me in the doorway, and Regina's shock was complete. Hello, Regina, Catherine said pleasantly. Lovely afternoon, isn't it? What is she doing here? Catherine and I have been having the most interesting conversations. Amazing how much we have in common. I stepped fully outside, forcing Regina to back up. Betrayed spouses tend to stick together. Sam, please, let's go inside and talk privately. Privacy is for people who respect it. You lost that privilege when you decided to air our business in public. Regina tried a different approach. Fine, I'll take what's mine and find somewhere else to stay. But this isn't over. Actually, it is. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo. This is you and Grant at the Harborview site last month. Interesting conversation you were having with the environmental inspector. Regina stared at the image, her face cycling through confusion, fear, and calculation. Where did you get that? Same place I got the restaurant receipts, the hotel charges, and the very detailed report about Grant's business practices. I put the phone away. Did you really think you could manipulate city permits without leaving a paper trail? You can't prove anything. I don't have to prove anything. I just have to ask the right questions to the right people. I gestured toward the street, where Mrs. Patterson was walking her dog with obvious curiosity. Small town, Regina. People talk. Word gets around. Catherine stepped forward. Regina, I think you should know that Grant's financial situation isn't as stable as he pretends. Harborview is leveraged to the breaking point. If the project fails, it won't fail, Regina snapped. Grant knows what he's doing. Grant knows how to spend other people's money. There's a difference. Catherine's voice carried the authority of someone who'd managed a household budget for 15 years. But I'm sure you've done your due diligence before hitching your wagon to his star. The doubt in Regina's eyes told me everything I needed to know. She'd been so blinded by Grant's promises and lifestyle that she'd never looked at the actual numbers. My wife, for all her intelligence, had always been susceptible to confident men with big dreams. I need my things, Regina said, her voice smaller now. Take whatever's on the lawn. Everything else stays here until the lawyers sort it out. Regina looked at the scattered remnants of her wardrobe, then back at me. Sam, we had 22 years together. That has to count for something. It did count, right up until you decided it wasn't enough. I stepped back toward the house. You wanted someone who could satisfy you better. You found him. Now live with your choice. As Regina gathered her belongings from the lawn, neighbors found excuses to walk past or work in their gardens. The spectacle of a woman in a $1,000 suit stuffing designer clothes into garbage bags provided entertainment that would fuel conversations for weeks. Catherine and I watched from the porch, two directors observing the final act of a play we'd written together. Think she'll be back? Catherine asked. Oh, she'll be back. Regina doesn't give up easily, but next time she'll bring Grant. Good, Catherine said, her smile sharp as winter wind. I'm looking forward to round 2. Monday morning brought rain and the first real test of my resolve. I was reviewing blueprints in my office when Nina burst through the door, her face flushed with excitement and anger. Boss, you need to see this, she said, slapping a manila envelope on my desk. Grant Holloway's been making calls. Inside the envelope were photocopies of permit applications, inspection reports, and correspondence between Holloway Development and the City Planning Office. My name appeared in several documents, always in connection with code violations or safety concerns. He's trying to shut down our current projects, Nina explained. Claims we're not following proper procedures. 3 different sites, all flagged for reinspection. I studied the papers, recognizing Grant's strategy immediately. Construction permits were complex documents with hundreds of technical requirements. A motivated inspector could find violations anywhere, especially if they were looking hard enough. How bad is it? Could cost us weeks of delays, maybe more. The Harbor Street renovation is scheduled to finish next month. If we get shut down for inspections, we'll miss the deadline and lose the completion bonus. $20,000. Not enough to bankrupt me, but enough to hurt. Grant was applying pressure where it would cause maximum damage, using the same tactics he'd perfected for acquiring properties. Get me copies of everything, I said. Every permit, every inspection report, every piece of correspondence. I want a complete paper trail. Already on it. But Sam, this is just the beginning. Grant's got connections throughout the city government. He can make our lives very difficult. Let him try. I reached for my phone. 2 can play the influence game. My first call was to Tom Bradley, the city inspector who'd approved most of our recent projects. Tom and I had worked together for 15 years, and he'd never found a serious violation on any of my sites. Sam, I heard about the new inspections, Tom said before I could explain why I was calling. Orders came down from the top, nothing I could do about it. Who gave the orders? Deputy Director Morrison. Said there'd been complaints about safety violations. Tommy Morrison, Grant's poker buddy and the man who controlled permit approvals for the entire downtown district. The connection was obvious, but proving it would be another matter. Tom, I need a favor. When you do the re-inspections, I want everything documented. Photos, measurements, detailed reports. If there are violations, I'll fix them. But I want proof of exactly what's wrong. You got it. Sam, for what it's worth, your sites are always clean. This feels like harassment. It is harassment, but harassment works both ways. My second call was to Catherine, who answered on the first ring. He's moving faster than I expected, I said, explaining Grant's permit strategy. That's Grant. He believes in overwhelming force. Hit hard, hit fast, and keep hitting until the other guy gives up. Catherine paused. But he's also predictable. I know his patterns. What do you mean? Grant always celebrates his victories. When he thinks he's winning, he gets careless, drinks too much, talks too loud, brags about his strategies. Her voice carried a note of satisfaction. Thursday night poker game. He'll be there, and he'll be running his mouth about how he's handling the Sam Blackwood problem. You want me to crash the poker game? I want you to be prepared for what comes next. Grant won't stop with permit violations. He'll escalate until you either back down or fight back hard enough to hurt him. That afternoon, the first inspector arrived at my Harbor Street site. Mike Chen was thorough, professional, and obviously uncomfortable with his assignment. He spent 3 hours measuring, photographing, and documenting every aspect of the renovation work. Sam, I'm not finding anything serious, he said, as we walked through the building. A few minor issues, nothing that can't be fixed in a day or two. Such as? Electrical box needs a cover plate. Couple of handrails are an inch too low. Missing permit posting in the front window. Mike shrugged apologetically. Honestly, this is the cleanest site I've inspected all month. But you still have to write it up. Orders are orders, but I'll make sure the report reflects that these are minor violations easily corrected. After Mike left, I called Catherine with an update. Grant's fishing, she said. He's hoping to find something he can use as leverage. When he doesn't, he'll try a different approach. Such as? Direct confrontation. Grant likes to handle problems personally when bureaucratic pressure doesn't work. I didn't have to wait long. At 6:30 p.m., as I was locking up the office, Grant's BMW pulled into the parking lot. He climbed out wearing his usual expensive suit and confident expression, but I noticed the tension in his shoulders. "Blackwood," he said, approaching with his hand extended like we were old friends. "We need to talk." I ignored the offered handshake. "About what?" "About this situation with our wives. Things got out of hand the other night. Maybe we can work something out." "Work what out?" Grant glanced around the empty parking lot, then stepped closer. "Look, Regina's a beautiful woman. I can understand why you're upset. But marriages end, Sam. It's nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" I laughed, and Grant flinched at the sound. "You've been using my wife to manipulate city permits for your development projects. You've been pressuring my business with bogus inspections. You've been screwing around with Regina for months while I paid for her lifestyle. But it's nothing personal. The permit thing is just business. Everything's just business with you, isn't it, Grant? Other people's marriages, other people's livelihoods, other people's lives. All just business." Grant's facade of friendliness slipped, revealing the calculating predator underneath. "You're in over your head, Blackwood. I've got resources you can't imagine. Connections, influence, money. You're a small-time contractor with a cheating wife and a failing business." "My business isn't failing. It will be. Those permit violations are just the beginning. I can make sure you never work in this city again." Grant straightened his tie, a gesture I was beginning to recognize as his tell when he thought he was winning. "Or we can settle this like civilized men. You give Regina an uncontested divorce, you stop interfering with my relationship, and I'll make the permit problems disappear. And if I don't? Then you'll discover exactly how much influence I have in this town." Grant turned toward his car, then paused. "Oh, and Sam, Catherine's been feeding you information about my business. You might want to ask yourself why a woman would betray her husband's secrets to a stranger." He drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot with rain beginning to fall. Grant's parting shot was calculated to create doubt, to make me question Catherine's motives. But I'd been married to a manipulator for 22 years. I recognized the technique. I pulled out my phone and called Catherine. "Grant just paid me a visit," I said. "He tried to buy me off, then threatened me when that didn't work." "Standard operating procedure. Did he mention me?" "He suggested you might have ulterior motives for helping me." Catherine laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Of course he did. Grant can't imagine anyone acting without a hidden agenda because he never does anything without calculating the benefit to himself." "So what is your agenda?" "Revenge, Sam, pure and simple. Grant destroyed my marriage, humiliated me in front of our friends, and thought he could discard me like an old suit. I want him to pay for that." The honesty was refreshing after years of Regina's calculated deceptions. "What's the next move?" I asked. "Thursday night poker game. Grant will be there, probably bragging about how he's got you cornered. I think it's time he learned that cornered animals bite back." "What do you have in mind?" "Leave that to me. Just be ready to move fast when the opportunity comes." As I drove home through the October rain, I thought about Grant's threats and Catherine's promises. The game was escalating beyond simple marital revenge into something more complex and dangerous. But I'd committed to this path the moment I changed those locks. Regina had said I wasn't man enough to satisfy her. Grant thought I wasn't tough enough to fight back. They were both about to learn how wrong they'd been. The rain continued to fall, washing the last of Regina's belongings from my front lawn and carrying them into the storm drains. By morning, there would be no trace of the display that had started this war. But the war itself was just beginning. Thursday evening found me parked across from Tommy Morrison's house, watching expensive cars fill his driveway. Grant's BMW sat between a Mercedes and a Lexus, the automotive equivalent of a power lunch. Through the basement windows, I could see shadows moving around a green felt table. Catherine sat beside me in the passenger seat, studying the house with professional interest. She'd traded her usual conservative attire for dark jeans and a black sweater, looking more like a cat burglar than a society wife. "Grant's already inside," she said, checking her watch. "He's been there for an hour, which means he's had time to establish his dominance and start bragging." "How do you know so much about poker psychology?" 15 years of marriage. Grant talks about his strategies constantly. He thinks poker is a metaphor for life. Intimidate the weak, exploit the desperate, and always project strength even when you're bluffing. And tonight, he's bluffing? Catherine smiled grimly. Grant's leveraged everything on Harbor View. If that project fails, he loses his house, his business, and his reputation. He's playing with scared money, which makes him dangerous and predictable. My phone buzzed with a text from Nina. "Inspections complete. Minor violations only. Sites reopen tomorrow." I showed the message to Catherine, who nodded with satisfaction. Grant's first move failed. He'll be frustrated, looking for a bigger play. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Time for phase 2. "What's that for?" "Insurance. Grant's about to make some very interesting statements about his business practices and his relationship with city officials. I want them documented." Catherine climbed out of the car and walked toward the house with confident strides. I watched her disappear around the side of the building, heading for the basement windows. The woman had hidden depths that continued to surprise me. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "It's working," Catherine whispered. "Grant's drunk and angry. He's been ranting about you for the last 10 minutes, explaining exactly how he plans to destroy your business. Tommy Morrison is eating it up." "Can you hear everything?" "Perfect acoustics. The basement window is cracked open for ventilation." Catherine paused, and I heard muffled voices in the background. "Oh, this is good. Grant's explaining how he's been using Regina to fast-track permits for Harbor View. He's giving them specific examples." "Are you recording?" "Every word. Grant just admitted to bribing 3 different city inspectors and manipulating environmental impact reports." Catherine's voice carried a note of fierce satisfaction. "He's also bragging about how he seduced Regina to get access to her personnel files." The conversation continued for another hour, with Grant apparently treating the poker game as a combination strategy session and therapy appointment. Catherine provided running commentary on his admissions of corruption, bribery, and manipulation. "He's getting reckless," she whispered during one particularly damaging revelation. "Grant just told them he's planning to have your contractor's license suspended through his connections at the state level. Can he do that?" "Not legally, but Grant's never been too concerned with legality when it comes to eliminating competition." Finally, Catherine returned to the car, her face flushed with excitement and cold air. "We got everything," she said, holding up the recorder. "Grant just handed us enough evidence to destroy him professionally and personally." "What exactly did he say?" Catherine scrolled through her notes, reading highlights from Grant's drunken confessions, specific bribes to city officials, detailed explanations of how he'd manipulated Regina into providing inside information, plans to use his political connections to drive me out of business. "The best part," Catherine said, "is that he named names. Tommy Morrison, Deputy Director Phillips, Inspector Walsh. Grant implicated half the city planning department in his corruption scheme. What do we do with this?" "We use it strategically. Grant thinks he's untouchable because of his connections, but corruption scandals destroy careers. A few well-placed leaks to the right journalists, and Grant's entire network crumbles." As we drove back toward town, Catherine outlined her plan. The recording would be transcribed and copies sent to the Portland Press-Herald, the State Attorney General's office, and the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. Grant's own words would trigger investigations that could take years to resolve. "But that's long-term strategy," Catherine said. "We need immediate leverage to protect your business and end this harassment." "What kind of leverage?" "The kind that hits Grant where he lives. His reputation, his social standing, his image as a successful businessman." Catherine's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Grant's attending the Harborview groundbreaking ceremony next week. Big public event, lots of media coverage, all the city officials who've been taking his money. You want to crash the ceremony? I want to turn it into Grant's public humiliation. Imagine the scene. Grant's giving his speech about Harborview's contribution to the community, and suddenly everyone's phones start buzzing with news alerts about corruption investigations. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Grant's moment of triumph would become his downfall, broadcast live to the entire city. His political connections would abandon him the moment the scandal broke, leaving him isolated and vulnerable. There's one problem, I said. Regina. She's implicated in this too. If Grant goes down, she goes with him. Catherine considered this. Are you having second thoughts about your wife? No. Regina made her choice, but I want her to understand exactly what that choice cost her. Then we make sure she's there for the ceremony, front row seat for Grant's destruction. We spent the rest of the drive refining details and timing. Catherine would handle the media leaks, using her connections in the social circuit to ensure maximum coverage. I would focus on protecting my business and preparing for Grant's inevitable retaliation. He won't go down quietly, Catherine warned as I dropped her off at her car. Grant's used to winning, and desperate men do unpredictable things. Let him come. I've been underestimated my whole life. It's become an advantage. As I drove home, I thought about the recording in Catherine's purse and the power it represented. Grant's own arrogance had provided the weapon for his destruction. The man who'd built his career on exploiting other people's weaknesses had just revealed his own. My house was dark and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos I was about to unleash. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my kitchen, planning the final moves of a game that had started with changed locks and scattered clothes. Regina had said I wasn't man enough to satisfy her. Grant had threatened to destroy my business and my livelihood. They'd both underestimated the quiet determination of a man who'd spent 22 years building something worth protecting. The Harborview groundbreaking was scheduled for Tuesday morning. In 5 days, Grant Holloway would discover that some foundations, once cracked, can never be repaired. Tuesday morning dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for destroying a man's life in public. I stood at the edge of Harborview's construction site, watching workers set up a temporary stage and arrange folding chairs for the groundbreaking ceremony. Grant had spared no expense, catered refreshments, professional sound system, even a red carpet leading to the podium. Catherine appeared beside me, elegant in a navy blue dress and pearls, every inch the supportive political wife. She carried a small purse that I knew contained copies of our evidence, ready for strategic distribution. Beautiful morning for a groundbreaking, she said pleasantly. Or a burial, I replied. The guests began arriving at 10 a.m. City council members, planning commissioners, local business leaders, and journalists from 3 different newspapers. Grant worked the crowd like a seasoned politician, shaking hands and sharing confident smiles. He wore his best suit and his most expensive watch, a man celebrating the pinnacle of his career. Regina stood beside him, playing the role of supportive mistress with practiced ease. She'd chosen a red dress that complemented Grant's tie, and her smile never wavered as she was introduced to various dignitaries. Looking at her, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She'd chosen her side, and now she'd live with the consequences. There's Tommy Morrison, Catherine murmured, nodding toward a heavy-set man near the refreshment table. And Deputy Director Phillips by the stage. Grant's entire corruption network is here. Perfect witnesses for his downfall. At 10:30, Grant took the podium and began his prepared remarks. He spoke eloquently about Harborview's contribution to the community, the jobs it would create, and the tax revenue it would generate. The crowd listened politely, occasionally applauding at appropriate moments. This project represents the best of public-private partnership, Grant declared, his voice carrying clearly through the morning air. working together with city officials who share our vision for Portland's future. Catherine checked her phone and nodded almost imperceptibly. The first news alert would hit in exactly 3 minutes, timed to coincide with Grant's closing remarks. Harbor View will stand as a testament to what we can accomplish when we put aside petty politics and focus on results, Grant continued, warming to his theme. This is how business gets done in the 21st century, efficiently, professionally, and with mutual respect between all parties. The irony was almost painful. Grant was describing the exact opposite of his actual business practices, praising the integrity he'd systematically corrupted. At 10:47, phones began buzzing throughout the crowd. The first alert came from the Portland Press-Herald. Breaking: FBI investigating corruption in city planning department. Within seconds, additional notifications followed from television stations, radio news, and social media outlets. I watched Grant's face as he noticed the disturbance in his audience. City officials were checking their phones with growing alarm, while journalists began making urgent calls to their editors. The polite attention of moments before dissolved into whispered conversations and worried expressions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Grant said, trying to regain control of the situation, "if we could please focus on the ceremony, Mr. Holloway." A reporter from Channel 8 pushed forward with a microphone. "Do you have any comment on the federal corruption investigation involving Harbor View permits?" Grant's composure cracked like ice under pressure. "I'm not aware of any investigation. What about allegations that you bribed city officials to fast-track environmental approvals?" Another journalist joined the fray, sensing an opportunity to press the attack. "Those allegations are completely false. Sir, we have audio recordings of you discussing specific bribes with city planning officials. Would you like to respond?" The crowd erupted into chaos. City officials fled toward their cars, while reporters surrounded Grant like sharks around wounded prey. Cameras flashed and microphones thrust forward as Grant tried desperately to maintain his dignity. Regina grabbed Grant's arm, her face pale with shock and fear. She'd finally realized that her association with Grant had made her a target of the investigation. The woman who'd walked out on me for a better life was discovering that some improvements come with hidden costs. Catherine moved through the crowd with predatory grace, distributing copies of transcribed recordings to key journalists. Each document contained specific quotes from Grant's poker game confessions, complete with dates, times, and corroborating evidence. "Mr. Holloway," a reporter from the Press-Herald called out, "can you explain this recording where you discuss paying Inspector Walsh to overlook environmental violations?" Grant's face went from pale to gray. "That recording is taken out of context. What about your statements regarding the use of city personnel files to identify property owners for intimidation?" "I never said that." "Sir, we have a complete transcript. Would you like me to read your exact words?" The feeding frenzy intensified as more damaging quotes emerged. Grant's own voice, preserved on digital audio, destroyed every denial he attempted. The man who'd built his career on manipulation and intimidation was being destroyed by his own arrogant confessions. I noticed Tommy Morrison trying to slip away from the crowd, but a television crew intercepted him near the parking area. Deputy Director Phillips was already in his car, speeding away from the scene with reporters in pursuit. "Sam?" Regina appeared beside me, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "We need to talk." "Do we?" "Please. I know I made mistakes, but this is insane. They're talking about federal charges, prison sentences. Actions have consequences, Regina. You chose to help Grant manipulate city permits. You chose to betray your professional ethics for a man who saw you as a useful tool." I looked at her without sympathy. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." I never meant for it to go this far. Grant said it was just standard business practice. Grant said a lot of things, most of them lies. I gestured toward the chaos surrounding the podium, where Grant was still trying to fend off increasingly aggressive questions. "But I'm sure he'll take care of you. After all, you're his partner in this. Regina's face crumpled as the full implications hit her. Her city job was finished. No government agency would employ someone implicated in a corruption scandal. Her relationship with Grant was a liability now, connecting her to federal crimes. Her comfortable life had evaporated in the span of 20 minutes. Sam, please, I'll do anything. You already did everything. You chose Grant over me, corruption over integrity, short-term gain over long-term consequences. I turned away from her. Now live with your choices. The ceremony had completely collapsed into a media circus. Grant finally abandoned the podium and pushed through the crowd toward his BMW, Regina trailing behind him like a lost child. Reporters followed them to the parking lot, shouting questions and demanding statements. Catherine appeared at my side, watching the retreat with obvious satisfaction. Phase 1 complete, she said. Grant's finished in this city. No politician will take his calls, no bank will extend his credit, no contractor will work for him. What about Harbor View? The project's contaminated now. Every permit will be scrutinized, every approval questioned. Even if Grant somehow survives the investigation, Harbor View is finished. We watched Grant's BMW speed away from the construction site, followed by a convoy of news vans. The man who'd arrived that morning as a successful developer was leaving as a suspected criminal, his reputation in ruins, and his future uncertain. Think he'll fight back? I asked. Catherine's smile was cold as winter wind. Grant's a cornered animal now. He'll lash out at whoever he blames for his downfall, which means you'd better be ready. I've been ready since the night I changed those locks. As we left the construction site, I reflected on the morning's events. Grant's public humiliation was satisfying, but it was also just the beginning. Desperate men do desperate things, and Grant still had resources and connections that could be dangerous. But I'd learned something important about myself over the past week. Regina had been wrong about my capabilities, and Grant had underestimated my determination. I wasn't just man enough to satisfy a woman. I was man enough to destroy anyone who threatened what I'd built. The real test was still coming. The retaliation came faster than I'd expected. Thursday morning, I arrived at my Harbor Street site to find 3 police cruisers and a fire department inspection team surrounding the building. Detective Ray Rossi, a tired-looking man in his 50s, met me at the construction fence. Sam Blackwood? That's me. We had a report of unsafe working conditions at this site. Anonymous tip about structural violations that could endanger public safety. Rossi gestured toward the building, where inspectors were photographing everything with methodical precision. You mind if we take a look around? Not at all. But I just passed a full inspection on Monday. Everything's up to code. Anonymous tipster seemed pretty specific about the problems. Mentioned loose scaffolding, exposed electrical work, improperly stored hazardous materials. Rossi consulted his notebook. Caller claimed to be a concerned citizen who'd observed workers violating safety protocols. I knew exactly who'd made that call. Grant was using the same harassment tactics he'd perfected for acquiring properties, but now he was desperate enough to involve law enforcement. Detective, I've been doing construction for 22 years. My safety record is spotless. This is harassment, pure and simple. Maybe so, but we have to investigate every report. Rossi lowered his voice. Between you and me, this feels like someone with an agenda, but my hands are tied until we complete the inspection. The inspection took 4 hours and turned up nothing more serious than a missing hard hat and an improperly labeled paint can. The fire marshal signed off on the site, the police filed their report, and everyone went home satisfied except the anonymous caller. But the damage was done. 4 hours of lost productivity, confused workers, and negative publicity as neighbors wondered why police were investigating my construction site. Grant had scored a minor victory in the war of attrition. Catherine called as I was locking up the site. I heard about the inspection, she said. Grant's getting sloppy. Anonymous tips to police create paper trails, and paper trails lead back to sources. Can you trace the call? Already working on it. But Sam, this is just the beginning. Grant's lost everything. His business, his reputation, his political connections. He's got nothing left to lose, which makes him extremely dangerous. What's his next move? Direct confrontation. Grant's always believed in personal intimidation when other tactics fail. He'll come after you face to face, probably with backup. That evening, I was working late in my home workshop when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw two men in expensive suits standing on my porch. Neither one was Grant, but they had the look of professional muscle, gym-built physiques, and cold, unreadable eyes that suggested they'd seen far too much. I opened the door with my phone already dialing 911. Mr. Blackwood? The larger man spoke with a slight accent, possibly Eastern European. We represent certain business interests that have been affected by your recent activities. I don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Holloway's projects have encountered difficulties, projects that employ many people, support many families. Perhaps you could reconsider your opposition to these beneficial developments. Perhaps you could get off my property before I call the police. The second man stepped forward, his jacket opening slightly to reveal something metallic tucked into his waistband. Mr. Blackwood, we're trying to have a civilized conversation about mutual interests. The conversation's over. I held up my phone, showing the 911 call in progress. You have 30 seconds to leave before the police arrive. The men exchanged glances, then retreated to a black sedan parked across the street. As they drove away, I noticed the license plate and memorized the number. Grant had escalated from harassment to intimidation, bringing in professionals to handle what he couldn't accomplish through legal channels. I called Catherine immediately. He sent muscle to my house, two guys who looked like they'd stepped out of a crime movie. Grant's losing his mind. Professional intimidation creates evidence, witnesses, criminal liability. Catherine paused. Unless he's planning something permanent. The implication hit me like a cold wind. Grant wasn't just trying to scare me anymore. He was considering more direct solutions to his problem. I'm calling the police. Do that. But also call Nina and make sure your work sites have security. Grant might target your business if he can't get to you directly. I spent the next hour on the phone with Detective Rossi, reporting the incident and providing descriptions of Grant's messengers. Rossi took the report seriously, promising increased patrols around my house and business. Sam, I've been a cop for 25 years, he said. When desperate people start hiring muscle, situations escalate quickly. Watch your back. Friday morning brought news that Grant's desperation had reached new levels. Nina called at dawn, her voice tight with anger. Boss, someone trashed the Harbor Street site last night. Broke windows, spray painted the walls, dumped paint all over the interior work. How bad? Bad. Probably 2 weeks of cleanup and repairs. The bastards knew exactly what they were doing, targeted the most expensive finishes, the stuff that can't be salvaged. I drove to the site and surveyed the damage. Whoever had done this understood construction well enough to cause maximum financial impact with minimum effort. Windows were broken strategically to let in weather. Paint had been poured over hardwood floors and custom millwork. Electrical fixtures were smashed beyond repair. Insurance will cover most of it, Nina said, but we'll miss the completion deadline. That's $20,000 in penalties, plus the cost of overtime to get back on schedule. Any witnesses? Mrs. Patterson across the street saw a van parked outside around midnight, but she didn't get a plate number. Said it looked like a work vehicle, maybe a contractor's truck. Grant was using professionals now, people who knew how to cause damage without leaving evidence. The vandalism was too sophisticated for random criminals, too targeted for casual malice. My phone rang. Grant's number appeared on the screen. Blackwood. Sam, I heard about the unfortunate incident at your construction site. Terrible thing. Random vandalism. Cut the crap, Grant. We both know who's responsible. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, but perhaps this is a good time to discuss our mutual situation. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer. What kind of offer? Full compensation for your damages plus a substantial bonus in exchange for your cooperation in resolving certain misunderstandings about my business practices. Grant was trying to buy me off, using my own losses as leverage. The man who'd destroyed my property was now offering to pay for repairs in exchange for my silence about his corruption. Go to hell, Grant. Sam, be reasonable. This situation benefits no one. Your business is suffering, my projects are stalled, everyone's losing money. We can work together to find a solution that serves everyone's interests. My interests are served by seeing you in prison. Prison? Grant laughed, but the sound was forced. Sam, you've been watching too many movies. Business disputes don't end in prison sentences. They end in negotiated settlements between reasonable men. Then it's a good thing I'm not feeling reasonable. I hung up and immediately called Catherine. Grant just tried to buy me off, offered to pay for the vandalism damage plus a bonus. He's more desperate than I thought. Grant never negotiates from weakness unless he's out of options. Catherine's voice carried a note of concern. Sam, I think you should consider accepting his offer. What? Not because you need the money, but because Grant's becoming unpredictable. Men like him don't handle failure well. If he can't buy you or intimidate you, he might try more permanent solutions. You think he'd actually try to hurt me? I think Grant's reached the point where he sees you as an existential threat. His business is ruined, his reputation destroyed, his political connections severed. In his mind, you're responsible for all of it. Good. I want him to know exactly who brought him down. Sam, pride is a luxury you can't afford right now. Grant has resources, connections, and nothing left to lose. That's a dangerous combination. But I'd already made my decision. Grant Holloway had underestimated me from the beginning, treating me like a minor obstacle to be brushed aside. He'd used my wife, threatened my business, and sent criminals to my home. Now he was discovering that some men don't back down, no matter how much pressure is applied. The war between us was approaching its final phase, and I intended to be the one left standing when the smoke cleared. Regina had said I wasn't man enough to satisfy her. Grant had assumed I wasn't tough enough to fight back. They were both about to learn how wrong they'd been. Saturday night found me alone in my workshop, installing additional security measures and preparing for whatever Grant might try next. The basement was my sanctuary, filled with tools I'd collected over 2 decades of construction work. Every piece had a story, a project where it had served its purpose. Catherine had gone quiet after our last conversation, which worried me more than Grant's escalating threats. She'd been my ally and intelligence source throughout this conflict, but her suggestion that I accept Grant's offer suggested she was having second thoughts about our campaign of revenge. At 11:30 p.m., my security system chimed as motion sensors detected movement in the backyard. Through the basement window, I saw flashlight beams moving across my property. Grant had decided on a direct approach. I called 911, then armed myself with a crowbar and positioned myself at the bottom of the basement stairs. The house's main floor creaked as someone moved through the rooms above me. They were inside, which meant they'd either picked the locks or found another way in. Footsteps approached the basement door. I heard whispered voices, at least 2 men coordinating their search. The door handle turned slowly, and light from upstairs spilled down the wooden steps. Mr. Blackwood? Grant's voice echoed in the stairwell. I know you're down there. We need to finish our conversation. The police are on their way, I called back. No, they're not. I've been monitoring your phone calls, Sam. Very interesting conversations you've been having with Catherine. Grant descended the stairs slowly, his hands visible and empty. Did you really think you could destroy my life without consequences? He reached the bottom of the stairs, and I saw he wasn't alone. The 2 men from my front porch flanked him, their professional demeanor replaced by obvious menace. This ends tonight, Grant said. You're going to sign a statement admitting that you fabricated evidence against me. You're going to withdraw your complaints to the FBI and the State Attorney General, and you're going to disappear from Portland permanently. Or what? Or we make you disappear. Grant's mask of civilized behavior had finally slipped, revealing the predator underneath. I've spent 30 years building my reputation in this city. I won't let some small-time contractor destroy everything I've worked for. Your reputation destroyed itself, Grant. I just documented the process. You manipulated Catherine into betraying me. You fabricated recordings and manufactured evidence. You orchestrated a conspiracy to destroy my business through lies and deception. The irony was breathtaking. Grant was accusing me of the same tactics he'd used throughout his career: manipulation, betrayal, and corruption. In his twisted worldview, I was the villain for exposing his crimes. The recordings are real, Grant. Your own words, your own admissions of bribery and corruption. Taken out of context, edited to create false impressions, the FBI doesn't seem to think so. Neither does the State Attorney General's office. Grant's face flushed with rage. You have no idea what you've done. Harborview represented $200 million in development, thousands of jobs, millions in tax revenue. You've damaged the entire city's economy to satisfy your petty jealousy over a cheating wife. I expose corruption in city government. If that damaged your business, maybe you should have tried operating legally. Legal? Grant laughed bitterly. Sam, you're so naive it's almost touching. Nothing gets built in this city without greasing the right palms, making the right connections, playing the game according to the real rules. I just did it more efficiently than my competitors. You did it more arrogantly. That's what brought you down. Grant gestured to his companions, who moved to flank me on either side. The basement suddenly felt much smaller, the walls closing in as professional muscle prepared to do their work. Last chance, Sam. Sign the statement, admit your lies, and walk away. Or we handle this the hard way. There's a third option, I said, raising the crowbar. You get the hell out of my house before I call your bluff. This isn't a bluff. Sure it is. You're a businessman, Grant, not a criminal. You hire people to intimidate and threaten, but you don't have the stomach for actual violence. That's why you brought help. Grant's confidence wavered slightly. You're wrong about me, Sam. I've done whatever was necessary to protect my interests. I won't hesitate to do it again. Then do it yourself. Send your boys away and settle this man to man. The challenge hung in the air between us, and I saw Grant's calculation process working behind his eyes. He'd spent his career hiding behind lawyers, bureaucrats, and hired muscle. Direct confrontation wasn't his style. I don't need to prove anything to you, he said finally. No, but you need to prove something to yourself. All this time, you've been telling yourself you're tougher than me, smarter than me, better than me. Here's your chance to prove it. Grant looked at his hired muscle, then back at me. You think this is some kind of movie? Good guy versus bad guy, winner takes all? I think this is two men settling a score. Everything else is just noise. Fine. Grant nodded to his companions. Wait upstairs. This won't take long. The two men hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with leaving their employer alone with an armed opponent. But Grant's authority held, and they retreated up the basement stairs. Just you and me now, Grant said, rolling up his sleeves. The way it should have been from the beginning. Agreed. Grant was bigger than me, probably stronger, definitely younger. But I'd spent 22 years swinging hammers and hauling materials, while he'd spent the same time sitting behind desks and attending meetings. Physical labor builds a different kind of strength. He came at me with a businessman's idea of fighting, wild swings and brute force. I sidestepped his first punch and brought the crowbar down across his forearm. Grant screamed and staggered backward, clutching his injured arm. That's for threatening my business, I said. Grant tried to tackle me, but I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him into my workbench. Tools scattered across the floor as he struggled to regain his footing. That's for using my wife to manipulate city permits. The fight was over before it really began. Grant wasn't a physical man, despite his gym membership and expensive clothes. When faced with actual violence, he crumpled like a house of cards. "Please," he gasped, clutching his face. "I'll give you whatever you want. Money, property, anything. I want you to understand something, Grant. I'm not the weak man you thought I was. I'm not the pushover you could intimidate and manipulate. I'm the man who destroyed your life because you made the mistake of threatening mine." Grant nodded frantically, his arrogance completely evaporated. "Now get out of my house. Take your muscle with you. If I see you again, if you contact me again, if you so much as drive past my property, I'll finish what we started tonight." Grant stumbled up the basement stairs, calling for his companions. I heard them helping him to the front door, their whispered conversations urgent and worried. After they left, I sat in my workshop and waited for the adrenaline to fade. The confrontation had been inevitable from the moment I changed those locks, but I'd never expected it to end with Grant begging for mercy on my basement floor. My phone rang. Catherine's number. "Sam, are you all right? I just heard—" "I'm fine. Grant and I reached an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" "The kind that ends with him leaving town permanently." Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "It's over then. It's over. What about Regina?" I looked around my workshop, at the tools and projects that represented my real life. Regina made her choice. Now she lives with the consequences. "And you? What will you do now?" "What I've always done. Build things, fix things, make something useful out of raw materials." After Catherine hung up, I poured myself a whiskey and sat in my kitchen, thinking about the events of the past 2 weeks. Regina had said I wasn't man enough to satisfy her, but she'd been measuring the wrong qualities. Real strength wasn't about dominance or manipulation. It was about building something worthwhile and protecting it from those who would tear it down. Grant had learned that lesson the hard way, and Regina would learn it soon enough when the FBI investigation reached her personnel files. Outside, October wind rattled the windows of my house. My house, not ours anymore. The locks had been changed, the threats neutralized, and the score settled. I'd proven I was man enough after all.